And we welcome you into today's roundtable. With us now, Javier Manjarres, managing editor of the Shark Tank, also known as the shark-tank.com if you're online. And
there you go.
Democratic strategist Franco Ripple. Thank you guys both for being with us.
Just want to make sure we got that right, Javier, right?
Yes, make sure it's right.
Let's take a moment now and listen to something Jeb Bush said about the spread of ISIS and Hillary Clinton.
ISIS grew while the United States disengaged from the Middle East and ignored the threat. And where was the Secretary of State? Where was Secretary of State Clinton in all of this? Like the president himself, she had opposed the surge, then joined in claiming credit for its success, then stood by as that hard-won victory by American and allied forces was thrown away. In all of her record-setting travels, she stopped by Iraq exactly once.
Javier, is this going to be a winning strategy for Jeb?
Oh, I think so. Look, the Clinton-Obama foreign policy is just that. It's one and the same. I don't know how she's going to get away for this. You know, she's going to have to answer for Benghazi just like the president will. And again, Jeb is right, and I'm sure Senator Rubio and Senator Cruz are all going to harp on this. It's going to be hard for her to come off this, especially coming off this whole email gate, which still continues to hamper her candidacy. But yeah, I think foreign policy, which she thought was her biggest attribute or her biggest plus, is going to hurt her.
Well, Franco, I want to point to something I found in Slate magazine, of all places. They're arguing that Jeb Bush's speech was a smart move. That Slate article reads in part, quote, "It's also a smart move because when it comes to what the U.S. could have done to prevent the disaster in Iraq and Syria, it's going to be hard for Clinton to defend her record without criticizing her former boss, something Clinton won't want to do during the Democratic primary, one would imagine." So, Franco, how does Hillary Clinton defend her own foreign policy record without criticizing Barack Obama? Is there a way to straddle that line here?
Well, something maybe a smart political strategy, of course, for Jeb Bush to attack the leading Democratic candidate who will be the Democratic nominee in the next president. That's fine. That's politics. It doesn't mean that it's true, however. Hillary Clinton, I think, has always been her own woman. Yes, she was the diplomat-in-chief serving this president and spreading his message around the world, but she's always been her own person. She's aligned with the president on some things. For example, the Iran deal, opening relations with Cuba, a very historic measure. However, I think on some other things, she's gone her own way and been more hawkish. You know, she was aligned with then CIA Director David Petraeus in pushing a move to topple Bashar al-Assad. And she later said that it was the failure to do that, timely enough, that led the jihadists to found ISIS.
Isn't it tricky, Franco, though, to try and take credit for those types of foreign policy maneuvers while at the same time you have the huge black cloud of ISIS in Iraq and Syria hanging over her head? I mean, that was going on while she was Secretary of State.
I don't think so, because this is a moving target just like any other. You know, the threat for the longest time since 9/11, it was seen that al-Qaeda was the largest threat to America. Now we know it's ISIS, and there are other threats as well. These things are moving targets. And, you know, what we know is that once Hillary Clinton saw that there was an issue, she engaged in it. And again, she's been, I think, a little bit more hawkish than this president. You know, early on, she pushed the president into unprecedentedly tough sanctions on Iran. So I think she has a record of doing things that are a little bit more hawkish, and I think that'll serve her well as president.
I'm just glad that Frank pointed out to everyone that Hillary was his mouthpiece, and she's just as complicit and culpable as the president.
Just like any Secretary of State would be for their president, a loyal warrior.
Well, we'll see.
So, Javier, I want to get your opinion after the debates. How would you rank Bush right now?
I think Bush is doing well. I see him dropping in the polls, and that's just because Trump and Cruz and Rubio have gone up, and same with as well as Ben Carson, as you pointed out in that Iowa poll. But look, Jeb Bush, the problem he's going to always have, he has, is his name issue. You know, the people have that, he has that name fatigue, and that's going to hurt him. But he's dead right on that. When he said last night in that speech at the Reagan Library, he was dead on, and he sounded very hawkish. So I think he's a great candidate. I just don't see him overcoming people, the newer generation. You know, Rubio said it himself. He believes Hillary Clinton and people like Jeb Bush are the candidates from yesterday.
Well, let's call that poll up. Let's call that poll back up if we can. If you notice, Jeb Bush
wasn't on the top.
Was not in there, not in the top five, and that's in Iowa, of course, a very important poll. But do you think Jeb Bush is too concerned about this? He's, you know, Iowa is not really where he's staking his claim there. He's more concerned about New Hampshire. Wouldn't you think, Javier?
With $100 million in the super PAC, I wouldn't be worried. If it was Bush, I wouldn't be worried.
But on the Democratic side, Clinton's name doesn't seem to be hurting her.
Well, I mean, Clinton has her own issues, and when someone like Bernie Sanders, a known socialist, is giving her a run for money in New Hampshire, he's beating her. What does that say about the party? What does that say about Hillary Clinton, her popularity? You know, when the left of your party, of the Democratic Party, is against you, you have real problems.
And that's a good question to ask Franco.
Well, not so fast, my friend. That is not, in fact, the case. Let's remember, first of all, that Hillary Clinton leads nationally by 35 points. And yes, Bernie Sanders is leading this one poll out of all the polls that have been taken. That's fine. In the most recent polls, the compilation of the most recent polls, I think 5 or so, she leads Bernie Sanders by an average of 10 points in New Hampshire. Also, let's not forget, she leads in Iowa by 26 points. And I want to take us down memory lane for a second.
Well, Franco, let's just take a pause right there. We've got a commercial break coming up. We'll talk more about Bernie Sanders. And also, what about Joe Biden? Where's he at right now? And why South Carolina might be so important to the current vice president of these United States? Franco Ripple, Javier Manjarres coming right back with us after this. And we welcome you back for part 2 of our roundtable.
Joining us once again, Javier Manjarres, managing editor of the Shark Tank and Democratic strategist, Franco Ripple. Thanks so much for sticking around, guys.
Yep.
All right, we're going to talk about Bernie Sanders. A GOP PAC, America Rising, released a new video today touting Bernie Sanders' campaign success. If you notice here on this page, that video was actually taken down for a brief period of time. The video shows Sanders with those huge crowds, cut with media clips talking about how big those crowds have been. And the video ends with the now popular hashtag, Feel the Burn. Javier, why is America Rising touting Bernie Sanders' success out there at these stump events?
Oh, that's an easy one. They're embarrassing Hillary Clinton. You know, where are these big crowds for Hillary? I mean, are they? Does she have this kind of enthusiasm? Obviously not. You know, like I said, you know, it's a small poll, but Bernie Sanders is beating her. And when you have organizations like MoveOn.org, who is as left can be, they're supporting anyone but Hillary. I think they're supporting Elizabeth Warren right now if she were to run. What does that say about Hillary Clinton's popularity?
Well, I want to talk about that poll that Franco brought up. Bernie Sanders is rocketing past Hillary Clinton. According to this poll in New Hampshire, he's beating her 44 to 37. There's the margin right there. Franco, how big of a deal is this to the Clinton camp? Are you saying they shouldn't be worried?
I am saying they should not be worried for one reason, as Javier pointed out. Jeb Bush with his $100 million war chest shouldn't be worried about the Republicans. I don't think that Hillary Clinton should be worried at this point, again, because this is one poll in an early state. Out of all the polls, as well as, again, in that early state, she leads by an average of 10 points in New Hampshire over the latest polling. That very same poll, by the way, has her at 80% favorability in that poll. Only 11% of Democratic primary voters in that same poll think that Bernie Sanders will be the nominee. What I wanted to do before the break was go down memory lane for a second, bring you back to the 2000 election. Bill Bradley, U.S. Senator from New Jersey, was up 10 points on Al Gore in the New Hampshire primary. 2 weeks out, he ended up losing by 6 points. My point is, early state voters make up their minds late, and I think they're going to make up their mind for Hillary.
Well, can I bring everybody back to 1992? You remember Ross Perot,
Yep.
Clinton, Bush? Are we going to see? Is that kind of starting to feel like that? Deja vu a little bit, Javier?
What do you mean? Are you referring to Trump?
Yeah.
Well, if he stays as a Republican, he may make it all the way to the end.
Well,
but if he jumps ship, well, then I think Hillary will be handed the presidency.
There is sort of a common thread between the Trump campaign and the Bernie Sanders campaign, and Senator Claire McCaskill talked about that a little bit. Let's take a listen.
People are really aggravated at the government right now. I think on both sides there is a lot of people that are just going, really, you guys can't get anything done. All you do is fight.
So there you go. I mean, even though Bernie Sanders, of course, is a sitting senator, he is not a Clinton. Javier, do you agree that the popularity that we're seeing with both Trump and a socialist like Bernie Sanders has to do with the overall discontent of the American voter?
Absolutely. Look, Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, they both speak to the majority of Americans. They don't speak to the establishment types or the fringe elements of each party. I think they speak to the regular Americans that are upset about nothing getting done in Washington, and they think, hey, why don't we get someone who is a little bit outside the box, if you would. And even though Bernie Sanders is a sitting senator, I think he's a little bit quirkier and different than the rest of the senators.
That's one way of putting it. No offense to Senator Sanders. We won't underestimate underestimate him. But Franco, I wanted to ask you, picked up this article the Atlantic had posted about Joe Biden's South Carolina strategy and how he has some close ties to the Palmetto State. The author of that article writes about an overall skepticism about Biden as a serious presidential contender, and there's plenty of that out there, but that skepticism doesn't extend to South Carolina. Not in South Carolina, where Democrats have been clamoring for Biden to take on a party standard bearer like Hillary Clinton. The conventional wisdom hasn't figured in the boost a win in an early primary could give him. The Democratic nomination for president will be decided in South Carolina, said James Smith, a South Carolina lawmaker and key figure in Democratic circles. There's such an appetite for Joe and also not for Hillary Clinton. Is this Hillary Clinton fatigue something real?
Well, before I get to that in South Carolina, and it is a very interesting phenomenon, I actually want to touch on something that was said just a moment before by Javier, which is that Hillary Clinton doesn't connect with real people. I think that couldn't be further from the truth. I think Bernie and Hillary both are connecting with real people. All you have to do is look at Hillary's college affordability plan that was released yesterday. That includes ideas from Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, and Bernie Sanders, as well as herself, taking the best from everyone and putting them into action. So
that time she roped off the press.
You know what? She's doing just like what her husband did, taking credit for what Republicans offer. Nice. Well, she may win that way.
Well, Franco, let me ask you, do you think Biden will run, and how much time does he have to make up his mind?
Well, I think time is running short. I don't think anyone knows for sure. Anyone who says that they know that Joe Biden is or isn't going to run is lying because they don't know. I think he's taking the time that he's certainly duly afforded to figure that out. You know, I think part of why he's so revered in South Carolina is because of his style of retail politics. That goes over a long way in the South. I've seen it firsthand as a White House advance associate to Joe Biden. We did a trip to Columbia, South Carolina. He was revered by everyone that was there like nothing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And we'll have to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you both for your time. Javier Manjarres and Franco Ripple, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, coming up next on Newsmax Now, ISIS claims responsibility for the death of another hostage, but this one is not in Syria or Iraq, and what this means for the fight against the Islamic State. Next.